Today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the undercard of Franchon Cruz versus Savannah Marshall early next month on the 1st, it appears they're running it back. April Hunter and Kirsty Bavington will be meeting each other for the second time. Those of you out there might recall that Kirsty Bavington, quite unexpectedly, gave April Hunter her first professional loss 2 or 3 fights ago. 2 or 3 fights later, they've won some fights, they've lost some fights. April Hunter sports a professional record of 6 wins with 1 loss, just 1 loss, no draws, no recorded knockouts, not yet. Remember the Bavington fight? April Hunter seemed very much flustered by the aggression and come-forwardness of Kirsty Bavington, but after some time has passed, enough time to allow April Hunter's mind to settle on the matter and build up the desire for a second fight, a rematch. I think it's important, these situations where one fighter might actually be a better fighter than another, but they had an off night, not dissimilar from what happened between Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos. I think it's important to run it back for the fighter, the better one, to settle their mind. April Hunter will soon get the chance to settle hers. Settle the score with Kirsty Bavington, who sports a professional record of 7 wins with 4 losses, 2 draws, 2 knockouts. More rounds in the bank than April Hunter. A more experienced fighter with more rounds in the bank than April Hunter comparatively. Albeit with more professional blemishes in her record, more losses. She's coming off of 2 consecutive losses in her last 2 fights, one to Candy Wyatt and another to Lauren Price. It's been over a year since Kirsty Bavington and April Hunter met. That was in October of 2021. Kirsty was on a bit of a hot streak, and she went on to win 2 fights immediately after that April Hunter fight, but she suffered a split decision loss to Candy Wyatt and a unanimous decision loss to Lauren Price more recently in May of this year. It's not turning out to be a good year for Kirsty Bavington. But since having beaten April Hunter, she has been busy. She has been active. April Hunter herself, since having lost that fight to Kirsty Bavington in late 2021, she hasn't been as busy as Kirsty. She's fought 2 times. Just 2 to Kirsty Bavington's 4. Both fights April Hunter had last year in April, in October, were against journey women with upside-down records. So if April Hunter really is better than what she showed in the Bavington fight, there's only one way to prove it. In the ring. Unless this is just one of those situations where one fighter has the other fighter's number, for whatever reason. The landscape at 147 pounds is changing. Where not that long ago, there was only one champion, just one champion at this weight, undisputed champion Jessica McCaskill. Very soon, there could be as many as 3. Newly crowned WBO champion Sandy Ryan, Jessica McCaskill, who I just mentioned, and the winner of the upcoming Natasha Jonas versus Candy Wyatt fight for what is the newly vacated IBF title. 3 separate world champions, thus 3 separate world title opportunities for the winner of this fight to pursue. April Hunter and Kirsty Bavington making up some of the depth in today's women's welterweight division. Some very promising fighters at this weight. Lauren Price among them, Olympic gold medalist Lauren Price. Hard-punching Dee Allen, who not that long ago was looking for a fight with Kirsty Bavington. Kirsty wouldn't give her the time of day. You've got Lauren Price, you've got Dee Allen, you've got Puerto Rico's own Stephanie Piñeiro. The landscape is definitely changing at 147 pounds. It is. I could see the winner of this fight, potentially, going on to challenge the winner of Jonas versus Wyatt, especially if the winner of Jonas versus Wyatt ends up being Natasha Jonas. That'd be an in-house fight. If April Hunter wins, if April beats Kirsty Bavington and Natasha beats Candy Wyatt, a fight between them would be an in-house fight for Boxer. Both those fights are happening on the same show, the same card, the undercard of Franchon Cruz versus Savannah Marshall. Maybe Natasha, if she wins, she makes a voluntary defense of the title against the winner of this fight. Maybe. We'll see. I like April Hunter to win the rematch. I think she's catching Kirsty Bavington at the right time, coming off of 2 consecutive losses. Kirsty can't be riding high. But at the same time, Kirsty Bavington going into this fight, this rematch, has the mental edge that she's not in unfamiliar territory, that she beat April Hunter before. Perhaps she could beat her again. I'm not banking on it. I've got April Hunter on points. Maybe we get 3 fights out of these 2. Kirsty won the first one. I think April is going to win the rematch, and maybe there will be a rubber match afterwards to settle it. Break the tie, because I do have April winning in July. Men's welterweight news ahead of their long-awaited, long-anticipated showdown. Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. Spence promises a one-sided ass-whooping. Crawford is a great fighter, but hasn't fought anybody.
Saying what they've got to say to sell this fight. Will Errol Spence Jr. make good on his promise?
Terrence is a great fighter, and I'm going to break another great fighter's will, mentally and physically. I'm going to dominate him and come out on top, said Spence. Terrence hasn't fought anybody. Even Sean Porter said he didn't train like he should against him. Kell Brook was already broken. I broke Brook's other eye.
Yeah, I've heard all this stuff.
What Errol has to say about Terrence's knockout win over Kell Brook, what he has to say about his knockout win over Sean Porter. Sean Porter, who Errol couldn't knock out.
Terrence knocked him out. You didn't.
Your fight with Sean, it wasn't one-sided. It wasn't a one-sided ass-whooping. It was competitive, and I recall seeing Sean Porter hurt Errol Spence Jr. at least 2 times throughout the course of that fight. Shot to the body.
A looping shot to the head.
That fight was not one-sided. That fight was competitive, and Sean Porter gave Errol Spence Jr. all he could handle. Hurt him 2 times throughout the course of that fight. If you couldn't beat Sean Porter in one-sided fashion, I hardly think you're going to do that to Terrence.
The Brook fight wasn't one-sided either.
This is going to be a one-sided ass-whooping. It's going to take a few rounds because he's a tough dude, but everyone gets broke, and we're going to break him down, said Spence. Spence is the WBA, WBC, IBF champion, and the winner of the fight will be crowned as boxing's first undisputed champion at welterweight in the 4-belt era. I can guarantee you this. It's going to be action-packed. It's going to be an old-school type of fight, said Spence. If you've been craving those old fights, you have to tune into this one. This is a legendary fight. Belts aside, you talk about these 2 fighters, just these 2. This is the biggest fight in boxing, especially because of the action we bring. We're both going for the victory.
I respect that Errol Spence Jr. finally came around.
I do.
I respect that he finally decided to honor his word and do the fight.
I respect it, but as far as this being a one-sided ass-whooping, as stated,
nah, man.
You didn't whoop Sean Porter's ass in one-sided fashion, or even Kell Brook. Kell Brook, who was coming off a 5th-round TKO stoppage up there at middleweight against Gennady Golovkin, he suffered a fractured orbital bone in that fight.
Remember?
He went up there, he got trounced by Gennady Golovkin over the course of 5 rounds, got his face broke so that he could have to drop all the way back down to welterweight to take on Errol Spence Jr. And when he did, at the start of their fight, it wasn't one-sided. It was competitive. It was actually alarming how many jabs Kell Brook, an orthodox fighter, was connecting on Errol Spence Jr., a southpaw.
Southpaw is supposed to be the one with lead foot advantage.
Southpaw jab is supposed to come over the top of the orthodox jab, but in that fight, it was Kell Brook landing quite a few jabs at the start, and Errol eventually turned the tide. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm just saying that the Brook fight wasn't a one-sided ass-whooping.
Brook was coming off a loss.
The Porter fight was not a one-sided ass-whooping.
And that was before Errol's car accident.
So I don't agree. I don't think this is going to be a one-sided ass-whooping at all. In fact, I think Terrence is going to stop Errol Spence Jr.
If anybody's going to get their ass whooped here, it's Errol.
Errol Spence Jr., who says, my ability, my will, my all-around being better, I'll beat Terrence Crawford.
He'll try.
Errol Spence Jr., a solid boxer puncher with a solid jab, good power, decent power.
Sometimes it's overstated.
I think it's overrated. Errol Spence, who characteristically picks up the tempo, picks up the pace after a couple of rounds, throws punches in bunches and seeks to overwhelm his opponents with volume.
Yeah.
You do that with a counterpuncher.
Yeah.
You do that with a mover.
Guy who can fight on the fly.
The more you open up to get off punches, the more they can pick you off from the outside whilst fighting on the fly. We know that Terrence can do that.
It's what he did to Sean Porter, and he struggled less with Sean than you did.
He got hit less by Sean than you did.
It's not a triangle theory, it's not. I've had Terrence Crawford beating Errol Spence Jr. since before Terrence Crawford beat Sean Porter.
I've had Terrence Crawford knocking out Errol Spence Jr. for some years now, though I won't fault Errol Spence Jr. for trying, for saying he has great talent, great skills, Spence said on ESPN's First Take, but I feel like my ability and my will and my all-around just being a better fighter, I'm gonna beat him.
He's got to psych himself into this.
This may turn out to be the hardest fight of Errol Spence Jr.'s career, and I've never seen anyone take on a difficult challenge and succeed by telling themselves that they can't do it, that they can't succeed. So I get it. Errol's got to psych himself into this.
Errol Spence Jr., who opened up a slight underdog with the bookies.
Errol Spence Jr., who says, everything I've been through these 2 to 3 years, I should be an underdog against Terrence Crawford.
Do you know what's funny? When the betting lines first opened up on these two fighters for this particular fight, before Errol Spence Jr.'s car accident, he was a slight underdog then as well.
He was, I remember.
Not a huge underdog, a slight one, but still an underdog.
The unbeaten IBF, WBA, WBC welterweight champion isn't offended, though, that Terence Crawford has opened up as a slight favorite to beat him in their 12-round, 147-pound unification fight July 29th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. In fact, Spence seemed to expect that to be the case when he was asked about Crawford's status as the favorite during their press conference Tuesday at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. Spence figures that the physical setbacks he has endured over the past 3.5 years contributed to Crawford opening up as the favorite over him.
Now, during fight week, if there's a surge of fight fans that decide to bet it all on Errol Spence Jr. instead of Terence, that'll affect the betting line.
Whereas maybe Errol goes into the fight the slight favorite instead of Terence, because there's not much between them. He's an underdog, but only a slight underdog. That could change.
So he is a slight underdog.
Right now he is. Nah, I don't pay attention to it, Spence told Showtime's Brian Custer, who moderated the press conference. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, everything I've been through throughout these 2-3 years, I mean, I should be the underdog. But I mean, it is what it is, man. A lot of people's the underdog, and they wind up winning. That's why it's a bet.
What's working for Errol Spence Jr. is that he's eye level to Terence Crawford.
He's got a big frame for a welterweight, at least today's welterweights. He's got height, he's got length, and he's got power, some power.
Not one-hitter-quitter power, but he is able to beat his opponents into submission, provided they're within striking distance of him.
Because of his height and his length, he doesn't need to be right up on a guy to touch them, which could make it difficult for an opponent
To open up.
to get off punches because you're in proximity to get punched yourself.
Errol's got a good body attack, too. Terence Crawford has to be mindful of that. Terence, who usually has two good legs under him, Errol will look to take them away with some well-placed shots to the body. The caveat, however,
Trade-off is, you go for body shots and that side of your face, it's not protected. It's wide open to be countered.
that's the caveat.
Terence Crawford could not resist the opportunity to needle Errol Spence Jr. when Custer asked him about being the underdog, asked Errol about being the underdog. Terence said, they know what's going to happen.
Silver lining for Terence is that in spite of Errol Spence Jr.'s physical dimensions and his volume punching, his body attack,
What's working for Terence is that in all likelihood, Errol is going to be the aggressor. He's going to bring the fight to Terence, so Terence won't have to find him.
Terence uses more angles than Errol Spence Jr.
Errol is a more textbook fighter than Terence Crawford.
The angles that Terence Crawford cuts while he's getting off shots, getting off punches.
The angle of attack is not as conventional as what you get from Errol Spence Jr., which increases the likelihood of Terence landing a punch that his opponent doesn't see.
Those are the ones that knock you out.
Terence has landed his Moby Dick, his whale of a fight, and to that, Errol Spence Jr. says, what's it look like catching Moby Dick with a fucking fishing pole, man?
For those not aware, Terence Crawford likes to fish.
For some years now, Errol Spence Jr. has likened himself to be a big fish, the biggest fish in the men's welterweight division. As Crawford began to answer a question from Showtime's Brian Custer, Spence interrupted his rival with his most entertaining lines of their back-to-back press conferences in Beverly Hills, California and Manhattan on Tuesday and Wednesday. Man, that's cap, Spence said while seated on stage at the Palladium, Times Square. He's not catching me with no fishing pole, man. I'm the biggest. You can't catch me with no fishing pole. What it look like catching Moby Dick with a fucking fishing pole, man? Get the fuck out of here.
A front-foot heavy and aggressive opponent will give Terence every opportunity to get off his counter-punching, get off his counter-shots. Errol Spence Jr. might bank the early rounds in the fight due to activity.
Giving off the appearance of being the ring general while Terence Crawford gets his timing and distance down. Terence characteristically takes about 2 to 3 rounds before he gets into a groove.
Terence Crawford, who at the press conference smiled and finished his analogy.
His fishing analogy saying, man, they've all been caught before. Every last one of them. And July 29th, he's going to be caught too. I got a big enough hook for him, and I'm already reeling him in. July 29th, I'm going to put him on a bank. I'm going to put him on the bank. I'm going to gut him, and I'm going to fillet him. like I said.
The unbeaten WBO welterweight champion is an avid fisherman. Crawford's repeated references to catching Spence like a fish are plays on Spence once calling himself the big fish in the 147-pound division when he was asked about boxing Crawford.
Terence Crawford's recreational activities are a parallel to how he executes things in the ring, as it takes patience and understanding, know-how, to be a good fisherman. The same can be said for Terence Crawford in the ring.
Patience and know-how.
To effectively use a fighter's aggression against him, like he did with Gamboa, like he did with Felix Diaz, like he did more recently with Sean Porter.
2 gold medalists and a 2-time former welterweight champion.
We're gonna catch him, Crawford said. Well, matter of fact, we've already caught him. We're just reeling him in now. And July 29th, that's when we're gonna get him to the bank. Probably weigh him in, put him on the scale, chop his head off, cut him from the gut, the little butt up, you know what I mean. Take the little vice grips, pull his skin off, take the little knife, makes cutting sound. It's good.
Styles make fights, as they say. And Errol Spence Jr.'s normally aggressive come-forward style, it would work against him against a fighter like Terence.
You saw how Terence Crawford was able to offset Sean Porter's come-forward aggression with movement and counter-punching. Sean was not able to land as many punches on Terence as he did on Errol, with the difference being that Errol engaged Sean in the pocket, whereas Terence bull and matadored him.
Yeah.
He worked around him.
Yeah.
I think he's going to do that to Errol.
Cut his work rate down.
What punches he throws versus what punches he lands. Y'all like fish? Crawford asked the assembled media, how many of y'all like fish? I bet your pops like fish too. You like fish, don't you, Pops? Come on, you can say you like fish. You know what I mean. Your son is the big fish, so he loves fish too. You know what I mean. We're gonna give his pops a piece of decent fish too.
I'm a salmon guy myself.
Where Errol Spence Jr. is quite accustomed to dominating the action mid-range to inside, dominating the pocket, I feel like Terence Crawford will look to stay out of it.
Sharpshoot from the outside.
On the move, looking to walk Errol Spence Jr. into punches.
Sacrificing some of the early rounds in the first half of the fight because Errol's going to look the busier fighter of the two.
But it's when he gets through with something. I mean, we saw the effect that Yordenis Ugas had on Errol Spence Jr. when he got through with a good shot, a clean one. He knocked Errol Spence Jr.'s mouth guard out of his mouth.
For some reason, Errol got it in his head that he should go looking for it while Ugas is still throwing punches.
Gets hit with another clean shot and gets sent careening into the ropes. Needless to say, I think Terence Crawford can do a lot better than that. Not only do I think he can get through and he will get through, I think when he does, he's going to stop Errol.
I feel it'll be a counterpunch that does him.
In Errol, trying to be that Gatling gun, he's going to get sniped.